Rozneik, and we are going to dive into something very different tonight. This is a continuation of the conversation that we've been having in Venture. If you haven't had a chance to participate in it, I would encourage you to go back to Pastor Brandon's message from yesterday and catch up and come engage in this space right now. And so, well, first off, my name's Daniel. I'm a grateful believer. I struggle with addiction and anxiety. And maybe introduce yourself.
I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and my name is Rozneik.
Rozneik, thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. In the middle of the story of the last week in our country and our world, with the tragedy that befell George Floyd, and into the discussion and conversation and awakening that's happening within our country, I reached out to Rozneik. He's my friend, and I had a moment of powerful conviction in which I realized just how ignorant I was on the subject of racism and its effect in my life and the lives of people I care about. And so I called him, and we talked about it, and that was hugely helpful to me. Thank you. I don't know that I would have survived Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day that was if you hadn't have answered the phone. And another day went by, and I reached out and I said, would you be willing to do testimony? And he thought about it and prayed about it and said yes. And in that came back to me and said, can we do this as an interview? Yeah. And can we do this as a conversation? And it's just like, it's so good. That's so just Holy Spirit good, the way things have been coming together. And so that's our intention here. And I'm going to get a lot quieter, and he's going to get a lot louder. And we're going to walk through Rozneik's story. He's given me this privilege and this honor of being able to participate. And we're going to talk about racism.
And recovery.
And recovery. Well, we're going to talk about how racism relates to recovery. And I'm hoping that you can help explain a few things to me as if I were 4, so that maybe I can unlearn a few of the things that I learned when I was 4. Yeah. How old are you?
32.
32. So I'm 40. I've just a couple years. But we've lived in essentially the same time, in what is essentially, in theory, the same country. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I grew up thinking racism ended in the 60s. Like I was told about Martin Luther King, and we celebrated his life, and I didn't know any people of color. It wasn't part of my life in Tucson, and I moved up here to Western Washington, and it wasn't part of my life here. And how slowly I've been learning that this is a very real thing right now, and not just in a subtle way, but in an overt way, that true racism exists, and not just in the backwoods of wherever. I am humbled by how ignorant I've been. My hope is that you can share some of your story, like in that same timeline, like, because there I am, like some sort of 6, 7, or 8-year-old thinking this doesn't exist. And you're living your life, which I'm guessing was powerfully different.
Very.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself growing up?
Absolutely.
Give us the frame.
Yes. So I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, and even though it's not necessarily considered the South, a lot of country and Southern kind of morals and ways of life, just considered country folk. Grew up in somewhat broken home. My dad left. My parents divorced when I was 6. And so primarily grew up in a single parent home. My dad addiction runs in my family. And so he was essentially out, dealing with his demons and addictions and stuff. And mom raised us growing up in Kentucky. And it's, even though, like you said, there's only a, less than 10-year difference, it was a very different kind of life. And being introduced to racism was not necessarily framed in that sense. It was just more or less the ugliness in people. And here, son, this is what you're going to have to deal with. And you may face this in your life. And this is how you handle yourself in that situation.
Can I ask how old you were when you experienced that?
So I was roughly around 4 or 5 when I realized that I was black and I was different. that look different than the people that I went to school with. Because my neighborhood and my home, everybody looked like me. So kind of like what we were talking about, where how do you know any different if you've never seen different?
Sure.
So, yeah, it was eye-opening.
So I have this thought, and it could just be my thought. It's just the problem with thoughts. I think this is why these conversations are so important. It's like, did I learn something, or did I just have yet another creative thought? That's
Right.
like, I've been thinking about this stuff, and I've been thinking about our conversation, and like, I mean, this is like a critical unfairness and injustice that something would work this way. I mean, do you have a memory? And the reason I'm asking is because I'm really, well, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that everyone out there is actually doing better than I am and is less ignorant. That would be a win for everybody. But on the off chance that some people watching are not, or on the sometimes slowly train, like myself, that they kind of get a sense of, like, you know, Rozneik the kid learning this thing. Like, do you have a memory of learning?
I do, yes. So one of the earliest memories I have centered around this would be the first grade. And there were 3 black kids in my class. There was myself, a black girl, and another black boy. And there were about maybe 10 or 15 other white students and a white teacher. And what it looked like for me was that just by nature, like, you want to associate with everyone in your classroom,
Sure.
but not everybody is receiving, even at that age. And then you tend to go to people who look like you. And thankfully there were 2 other students there, but it kind of limits the classroom. And I didn't know that maybe, you know, only these 2 people were the people that I could talk to or be comfortable with. I tried it with everybody in the entire classroom, and essentially had to deal with either acceptance or rejection. And I learned at a young age that when you're rejected, sometimes you attempt to overcome that. And my way was comedy. I tried to make everyone laugh. Little Rozneik was a comedian.
Big Rozneik's pretty funny too.
I tried to make everyone laugh. And then trust me, a class clown sometimes got me in trouble, but that was what I chose. If I could make someone laugh and they smiled with their laugh, then they wouldn't look at me angrily. Or maybe they wouldn't see me as different or less than, that maybe for a second in this laughter, we can just be kind of human. And I recognize that even as a kid, maybe not to that depth, but reaching for that without necessarily knowing I was reaching for that.
Okay, that's interesting. So you tie that directly to this kind of this sense of being, like you said, like a tribe of 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. I know you,
Mm-hmm.
and like I can see those character traits in you today. I mean, unless I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, correct me. So what happens in your story? What happens that brings you into a space of needing recovery? If you're willing to share with us a bit of the brokenness of your story so that people can get a sense of this walk.
So with that, I suppose, with being different or certain people treating you differently as an outcast, or maybe not overtly, but
Sorry, what kind of things happened?
growing up in high school, and just about every school I went to was normally one of the very few black kids.
Sure.
And so I was often, hey, you gonna join the basketball team, or hey, we're gonna put you on the football team, and hey,
Good at sports, right?
yeah, very good at sports. Yes, at that age, it took me a while to get into sports, but as a younger kid, I was just trying to watch cartoons, to be honest. But it changed me, because when in 6th grade or whatever, the coach says, hey, hey, you're probably good. Hey, come shoot the ball. Oh, well, okay, I'll shoot the ball. I really didn't like it, but I felt like since he or someone put that inside of me that, hey, maybe this is there. So I kind of made it my own. Maybe I am good at sports. I was, to a certain extent, but that wasn't the route that I wanted to take. It was a route that was kind of, hey, this is you, so here, come do this, rather than what would you like to do? And I got chased around school for a while, bullied and not really having anybody there to support you. And being, honestly, my sister was the only one that I could really depend on, because she was in a grade just before me or higher than me, and kind of had to take care of one another. Because as I was the only black kid in my class, she was the only black girl in her class too.
Kids in school are cruel. Like, I remember that.
Can be.
I mean, did you deal with overt racism? People that were
Yes.
actively willing to just do that.
I got into a lot of fights in school. I learned that, it was revealed to me that I had a hot button. I had a button that someone could press and get an immediate reaction out of me. And we all know that as the N-word. And not with the A on the end, with the ER. And so in school, like, if you want to see how the new black kid acts in school, call him out of his name. And often on the first or second day or within the first week, I was in a fist fight. And it was my experience that, even though I may be the black kid and might not have any backup, I know how to fight. And then, you win a fight, and then you get kind of labeled as, a monster, or this guy, he's dangerous, and stay away from him.
It just kind of feeds itself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Come play sports. Here's the name. Oh, look, the kid's violent.
Mm-hmm. That's been my story. I can't say that would be everyone's story, but...
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm trying to understand, and what I'm understanding in general is that we have these narratives that are ignored and that we buy into, and they're very, very powerful. Yeah. One of the things we talked about on the phone was microaggressions. So I did not understand this word. I'm still trying to understand this word.
Yeah.
Not just overt racism of people calling you the N-word, trying to pick a fight, but people doing other things, subtle things. Can you explain what that is and how that feels?
Absolutely. One comment that I hear quite often is, "Oh, Rozneik, you're well-spoken for a black guy." Or, "Wow, you're really well-spoken. That's surprising." Or somewhere along those lines. I hear it all the time. And I would like to think that I have a good speaking voice, so you can't read too far into it. But when there's for A, you're pretty good for, hey, you're pretty handsome, or for a black guy, or, whatever else. It's always something to come with it.
So like this constant reminder.
Yeah, another example would necessarily, it's really hard to kind of revisit those things and those places.
Sure.
But sometimes it's not exactly what you say, it's about body language. And sometimes we say a lot of things without necessarily having to say things. Maybe I'm not going to physically stop you from doing something, but maybe I'll just withhold something, or maybe I'll, not be the best person I can be to help you along the way. Maybe I can point you in the right direction, but I won't, give you all the directions or give you a general idea.
Well, it seems like it's got to be there either way. So it's like, if this person here treated me a certain way, and then this person treated me a certain way, and then I met a third person, I would be an open question in my head. Am I going to be treated that way? Mm-hmm. Like, what about people that don't mean to, that are awkward or uncomfortable, or perhaps they don't know people of color? And people that are afraid of offending you, or people that maybe go out of their way to try to be overtly nice to you. Like, do you have relationships where race can just be avoided completely, where it doesn't happen, or does it always come up? Like, is this Is this something that cannot be avoided, that must be addressed in that sense?
It doesn't have to be brought up. Like when you, say for you and I, like when we were walking past the barriers of just being different personalities.
Like two strange dogs.
Right.
Getting to know each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, goodness doesn't go out of its way to be good. Goodness is just good. It's been my experience that evil tends to go very far out of its way. And it is okay with that. That's its design. It's totally fine with that. Yeah. Lost the question.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
So let's take Rozneik from high school.
Yep.
And you have a heart that's going a certain way. You have a family that has addiction in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a fighter. What happens?
I lose. Is what happened. What happened, I thought that because I judged my father that I could be better than him.
And your father was an addict?
He was an addict. And alcoholism got a hold of him, and drugs too. And it didn't miss me. It didn't skip a generation. I thought that, if I tried really hard, then, I could be okay. But essentially, I made the same mistakes that my father made, just at an earlier part in life. And after high school, I didn't have anybody there telling me what to do. But thankfully, by the time I became an adult, my father had really leaned into Jesus and found recovery. So as I was walking my addictions out as a man, Jesus had already grabbed a hold of him and set the path so he could speak wisdom into my life on what he had just got done walking out.
Now, is that how you connected to the person of Jesus? Was through your father?
No. My grandmother, the whole family, since I can remember, we've always been in the church, and I've always known of God and Jesus and Holy Spirit. And we call it the Holy Ghost. I come from a Pentecostal church. So same thing, just different terminology. But yeah, grew up in the church.
So where were you with your walk with God? And how does I gotta ask, man, how does your walk with God relate to racism? Have you ever, well, for example, a racist Christian?
Mm-hmm.
What does that do to witness? What does that do to credibility? Did you ever deal with doubt about God while watching what his children would do? I've never dealt with unfairness like that. You gotta understand, things have been, not that life is easy, but when I look at a contextual how the ball bounces, it's it bounces pretty consistently in a direction for me.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I am, rephrase that for me.
I'm wondering how big of a challenge it's been to believe, trust, and understand Jesus when the people that claim to love and follow Jesus behave in a way that contradicts his heart.
As a kid, I was faced with racism before I really understood exactly who Jesus was. And it's really hard. It's really hard because there are broken people all over the place, and
Sure.
there's only one Jesus. And I was taught at a young age that even though I may experience this, that I've always had a hope that not everybody's like that. And, I can't stereotype, I can't be one way to a certain type of people because of this one experience that I've had. And Jesus is the reason that I can even sit down and have a conversation and have victory over this, because it's because of my faith and trust in him that allows me to keep moving when I deal with situations like this, and to know that he dealt with the exact same thing. gives me hope. Well, I'm not Jesus, and he loved him anyway, and he prayed, God, Father, forgive them. Yeah, I have to try to do the same.
So it's interesting in a situation like this where I'm interviewing you, right? Because I know a lot more of your story. So I'm going to try to. I know that you joined the military.
Yes.
And at that point, you was your relationship with God clear at that point, or was that more of a space of brokenness?
It was brokenness, but it was pretty evident to me in that season that God was going before me, because I went to Iraq, and for an 18-year-old, like, from Kentucky, it just was, I knew that I was somewhere that I wouldn't have normally been, or I felt like I shouldn't have been. And in my opinion, I had the option to either get closer to God or run away. And I saw that a lot of other soldiers were faced with the same thing. And it doesn't always happen with growing closer to God, because when faced in the middle of a war, there's a lot of evil, and when you're facing that evil on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it can get very hard to focus and search for God when you're bombarded with all this negativity and evil.
So you're in the war.
Mm-hmm.
You come home. At this point, are you an alcoholic and a drug addict, or is that not
Full blown?
Full blown.
Full blown.
Full blown. I know, and we didn't get into it, but I know there's a history of like partying through the high school years.
Yeah.
There's some amazing stories about a house he lived in. They're terrible stories, but they're kind of funny too. Yeah. Where does it go? How does it go? What happens between the soldier that's come home, and the space where he realizes he needs and wants the gift of recovery, that full surrender to Jesus? What's that space? And then I'm going to circle back, and I'm going to want to talk about how racism affected it.
In that season, I would like to say I walked away from God, but God is always walking with me. I actively chose to look elsewhere. And that was honestly the darkest period in my life. I was married at the time, and I came back from Iraq, had a girlfriend at the time, ended up marrying her. My addictions were full blown. And in the midst of trying to reintegrate into the public back here and, outside of a war zone and, peacetime, and drinking and dealing with the military, I failed miserably. I failed. And that was only the beginning. Only the beginning. There was years of a downward spiral where I thought I was running from God, but ultimately, like you said with the question, it circle back around, and here I am.
Earlier, when we were talking before we started filming,
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about racism, and we talked about this question of like how it affected you.
Yeah.
And you basically said, how could it not? It's kind of baked in all the way through. When you look at your story and you look at these seasons of brokenness,
Mm-hmm.
How does racism relate to that? I mean, I'm not saying about blaming one way or another, but I just think we need to understand. Like, these are exactly the kind of questions. Like, I have no clue.
It's a good question. And honestly, when dealing with racism at a young age, I realized that I dealt with it because of the color of my skin. I could try and be funny. I couldn't achieve not being black. And so I had a choice.
Can I ask you
Sure.
terribly awkward question?
Sure.
Did you want to not be black? Was the pressure of it, did that come up?
I think the immaturity, yes, at one point I hoped for an easier life. I felt like a tremendous burden being black for a while, just because no matter where I looked or where I went, people in one way or another acted different. And sometimes you just kind of want to be a fly on the wall. You just want to live your life.
Sure.
And people constantly pointing out your differences.
I am super awkward. I would be very uncomfortable if we had to stop and have a conversation every time I entered a room. That would not work for me. So you found your space. You came home. And there's a lot of depth in there.
Oh, yeah.
Marriage ended.
Yep.
And you found your surrender into recovery. And so this is how I know you. The way I know you is a man of God who seeks after the Holy Ghost with everything he's got. And it's one of the things I love about you is that you wrestle and fight and you have energy and creativity and passion, and I love it.
Thank you.
So I didn't know this other dude. And it's one of the things that's amazing about recovery, especially if for anyone who's listening that's new, like things change.
Yeah.
So what was that like, grabbing onto recovery and allowing that change to happen in your life? Like what is that, and was that space of surrender? And I'm honestly a little curious about it, a little extra curious, specifically because you've had to deal with so many external pressures in life that I may not have. So I'm kind of curious if race plays a role there too.
Racism is kind of almost, forgive me for lack of a better term, but mainstream now. You know, the being woke, awakened to the racism in our country is almost, excuse me, new. But I've been living this, like, racism is a part of, it's woven into who I am, the fabric of who I am.
Sure.
And it's tiring. It's not anything extra because it's honestly a part of who I am. I run into someone racist, and someone makes a comment or looks at me awkward. For me, in my maturity now, I don't have to call that person out. I don't need to make them feel any type of way. Like, for me, for my peace, I just have to, Father, forgive them, you know, like, keep myself together. I can only control me. Don't bloop out, you know, don't bloop out. Like, just be cool. What would Jesus do? And you try to do your best to, you know, if you can somehow talk about it or address it in a safe manner, then do so. But oftentimes it's, hey, man, I just, hey, keep it pushing.
So do the tools you've learned in recovery, do those apply for dealing with this mess stuff? I don't even know the right word for it.
I'll be completely honest with you. It
hope
wasn't
so.
until this season that I realized that I'm going to have to go to recovery for racism. And I say that for myself, for what it's done to me and how it's changed me. Like, I say it's a part of who I am, but who is Rozneik without racism? What's that version of me look like? I don't know.
I got to tell you, I'm curious about that for myself, and even as a larger issue. No, hang on. So if I see a cultural thing that I couldn't see shortly ago, where essentially I'm not racist. That's been my self-identification my whole life, man.
Yeah.
I'm not racist. But it's a denial. It's like an active denial. It's not saying I am anything. It's just saying I'm not racist. That's not my thing. That's not my issue. It has nothing to do with me. And conscious or unconscious, that's just where I've been. My whole life, I've been not racist. And I look at that and it's like, that looks like recovery to me. Like, essentially, I have been in denial on the subject of racism. I have been entirely ignorant of it, like literally, because I've been ignoring it. And I think there's maybe a qualitative space where, this is going to sound weird, but maybe racism is a recovery issue, like in a very large sense. And I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
When I think about racism or when I'm faced with it, it's often coming from another person. And help me out here. rephrase that for me, because when I face this, I tend to want to go in 1,000 different directions.
No, I understand. And it's funny, so I will. But what I was actually thinking is how grateful I am that we could do this.
Yeah.
And that it's not perfect and pretty and scripted and it's messy and we're figuring it out, because I think that's what's needed right now.
Me too.
And I am personally very grateful. And the question was about this idea of like racism recovery. And like this becomes like a very global question in which maybe we have, like you would say, is that our job description?
Let me jump in here real fast before I lose it.
Take it.
It all comes back, whether it's my alcoholism, drugs, nicotine, anger, grief. It's a condition of the heart. And when I look at racism, I have to assume the same. It's a condition of the heart. And some people, this may upset some people because they want to put this thing up on a pedestal like it's something that it's really not. And honestly, just like with alcoholism, is it in the way of me seeing Jesus more or having more Jesus inside of me? Does it affect my relationship with Jesus? Yeah, then I definitely think it's a recovery issue.
Okay. So I have a curiosity, and this is again maybe uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. Is I have a sense that race can be the elephant in the living room. Like well-intentioned people. What do you see people doing with race that they really shouldn't do? Do you have any tips for well-meaning white folk who are getting in their own way? And you may not, but I just have to ask. Embarrassing as the question feels.
I don't think I necessarily have an answer practically what someone could do, or maybe I do. What could I have to look at? How would I appreciate in this moment? What could I use in this moment? And we kind of touched on this earlier. A simple text message that says, hey, with everything that's going on in the world right now, I want you to know that your life matters to me, you matter to me, your family matters to me. If you need someone to talk to or any way I can be there for you, I'm here. Or just a simple, hey, how you doing? You all right? You good? That, for me, opens a conversation. You know what, man, I'm really not doing so well. Or you know what, God is good and I have strength today. His grace is sufficient for me today and I can keep my head held high today. Sometimes it's not like that. But the conversation has to be started.
So even now, today, in a season where frankly race is something everybody's thinking about and dealing with, I mean, you have to be under a really big rock right now. And you're still finding a space where, I mean, is it possible people aren't reaching out precisely because, like, they don't know how to talk about it?
I can't, man, and you start getting into murky water there.
Sure. I mean, you can't
guessing
project
the motives.
No, you're right. I did that totally wrong. You're 100% right. That was.
And I only know that because it's something I'm currently struggling with.
I get you.
What does it look like? It doesn't necessarily look the same. We're all growing in different areas of our life centered around racism. All of us. And it's awkward and inconvenient, and
we're all awkward.
We're all awkward.
To one level or another. Like, you're a fit, good-looking dude.
Oh, why, thank you.
You're very welcome. I, historically, am very intimidated by fit, good-looking dudes. No, seriously. Like, I grew up like I was the kid in school that got beat up and was reasonably advanced reader and had no social skills whatsoever.
Okay.
I had the opposite experience of being invited into sports. I was I was picked last and told to sit down. And so it's interesting, I think, how people's issues can like connect to each other because we're all awkward and we don't know how to talk. Like, I don't know how to talk. Like, calling you was really, really good, but that was hard. Can people talk to you about these things? I mean, because, don't forget, you said a minute ago, it's like, you get tired of this. You've had to live in this stuff your whole life. Like, everybody's busy getting woke, and you're like, this is my life, which is fair. Like, at what point does it stop being? I mean, it's like it's not your job description to help everybody wake up, or is it? Like, where does that line go? Can people feel comfortable coming to you like I have, or is that just another kind of racism? Like, I mean, where's the boundary on that stuff?
I think that boundaries in this sense are what we're trying to break down. I think that had you reached out and said, racism, I hate it, bro, let's talk, I would have been, let's do it, man, let's do it. Whatever it looks like, the elephant in the room, I always say, people say, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. Man, you just gonna have to jump on that thing.
I've never heard anybody say that.
No?
That's the first time I've heard that. I kind of like it.
Listen, jump in there. It's like double dutch, man. Who knows? Just get in there, get a feel for it. If you jump in too soon, try to get back out real fast and then assess it. But what I would appreciate the most is your willingness to have that conversation. Not every conversation right now, from a white man to a black man, is going very positive right now. It could be a lot of finger pointing and this, that, and the other, but, that's not Jesus either. And that's who I'm trying to emulate. Like, honestly, that is the only example that I'm trying to walk out right now.
Can you tell us a bit more about that? So this is how I know you. It's like we're talking about race, and that is not actually how I know you. How I know you is a man pursuing Jesus, and that's the whole reason we're here. That's the actual point. Can you tell us a bit about your surrender to Jesus and how that applies in the things you've learned in life?
My moment of surrender is often coined into this phrase: red eyes from tears, snotty nose from crying, on my knees.
Like bubbles?
Bubbles,
Totally.
definitely. And begging God, literally, man, I've tried this, Jesus, every different type of way, and failed. Can you please take this? And I didn't believe it. My father told me, when you're ready and God sees and he's going to search your heart, if there's any desire in there for alcohol, you're going to keep that. And when you're ready to give it up, he'll remove it. I thought it was, some fairy tale stuff. I don't know. I didn't think it would work for me until that ultimate surrender. And that's what it was for me. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a gift I could never pay back. Definitely didn't deserve.
Nice. And how long have you been walking in recovery now?
Over 2 years.
2 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I am curious, like, what have you seen in your walk and not everybody does. Like, some people, everybody called, according to their abilities, according to as they are indeed called.
Right.
Everybody does different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always had the sense. Always dangerous to have a sense of someone, because you'd be projecting something, but you're naturally charismatic, you're a leader. Where has your walk with God taken you in the space of service to others? Because I just don't believe that I'm recovered, things are better now is like the limit to your story.
I served on the usher team in my church for years and faithfully served there. And then one day God says, hey, I'm going to move you over here. And instead of seating people and being in that role, he sent me over to work with the youth. And I was like, God, what? For real? Because I didn't feel called there. But I didn't feel qualified. Gotcha. And guys, don't worry about that. I got you. We'll figure that out along the way. Just go over here. And that's what I did. I showed up. Hey, guys, I don't really know what I'm doing here other than God said for me to show up, and I'm here. They're like, man, we're so glad to see you. And it's been beautiful ever since. It's growing and learning, man, and it's difficult too. But that's where God is calling me, and baby steps. Baby steps, man.
Nice. So you have youth pastor in your future?
No. Well, if God says that, then that's what I'll be.
get you a more robust conversation with Tony Matar, and you can learn how that works. I guess just kind of generally as we wrap things up, what advice would you give the newcomer?
If you're here and still here, well, whether you're still here or not, you were in the right place. And to the newcomer, like, keep it about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. And just do it for Jesus. That's the only thing I can say, because it can easily become, I found myself showing up for the people, and then people, sure. Great people, but people are going to let you down. And they can't be the main focus of why I'm here. But Jesus is the reason I keep coming back, and Jesus has got to be the centerpiece. Otherwise, it can easily fall apart. In my experience, for me, Jesus got to be the centerpiece.
Word. Do you have any tools or recommendations you'd give people that are starting off on this journey for how to cultivate that, especially if, like me, they don't do it quite right and they tend to make people the center to go left or right on the path?
Probably one of the most awkward and difficult things that I've come across in Celebrate Recovery, or just in being in these rooms.
Sure.
The awkwardness of asking someone to be your friend or accountability partner or sponsor. It's like
we're in second grade again.
You want to be my friend.
I do want to be your friend.
Let's be friends.
Can you help me be your friend?
Yes.
I'm not necessarily that good at it.
I'm not that great either. Let's learn together.
That sounds like a plan. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Getting a team together. Meeting people. Being vulnerable. And being open.
Word. I guess to put a pin in where the subject's been, this thing that's been baked into life, but that is not the core of life, but is the core of the present moment, racism. What advice will you give to someone that wants to take steps to learn about this or to deal with this in themselves?
I can't change the world. I can't change you. I can only focus on myself. And I can only truly focus on myself when I'm really ready to see myself for all that I am, the good, bad, and the ugly. And to truly place myself at the feet of Jesus and say, fix even all the stuff that I can't see. And being open to that. Being open to God revealing something in you that
it's good.
Maybe you hold as your entire identity.
Right. Show me the hidden things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said earlier that praying for patience is dangerous and difficult. Show me the hidden things. That one can be hard. It's a fair question. Like, again, I can't escape the thought that we have a problem with racism. Yeah. There are millions of people and people I trust individually that are saying so. By what basis do I not listen to those voices? And so given that problem exists without question, and pretty much everybody's saying, I'm not racist, it really seems like everyone needs to stop and ask myself, am I? And how am I? And what am I doing? Would you say that's true?
I would.
And we didn't actually set a timer, so I have no idea how long this has actually gone, but it feels about right, which is questionable. But we'll find out. Tonight, in small groups, my hope is that with our small group leaders, this can be the topic of conversation. My encouragement to anyone listening is to have the courage to pray the prayer that Rozneik just laid out, of looking into the hidden things and God, show me what I have to work with and take all the good and all the bad. And that's something that applies to all of us. 100%. I know some people, especially given the recent months we've walked through in this country, don't want to deal with one more thing. And that's an understandable position. My encouragement to you is on this subject to not see this as something that needs dealing with, but instead an amazing opportunity. And just an outrageous opportunity after so much difficulty to do something absolutely hopeful. in dealing with an issue that never got dealt with and needed to be dealt with, and that a lot of us believe was dealt with but has not been dealt with. So enjoy your groups. Be a little bit different tonight. Please have the courage to dive into this subject of racism. And please, 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 please thank Rozneik for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.